Once upon a time, a little company named Sega wanted to make its mark on gaming with an IP that would shock the world. The group had already entered the market strongly with some pretty fire racing games, but nothing they attempted in the mascot department was fitting the bill as a hallmark of the gaming industry. Early video game companies were playing things safe when it came to this area, using bright worlds, cohesively designed protagonists and villains that let you know who was on which side of the good versus evil spectrum, music that was cheery or soft-toned, and gameplay that warranted perfect execution lest you be sent back to the start. Even Sega themselves were of this same mindset with those early mascot IP iterations I mentioned before, until one day in 1991 on the distant location of South Island. Meet Sonic the Hedgehog.
I'm Sonic! Sonic the Hedgehog!
A blue rodent that can run at unfathomable speeds, loves freedom, lets the wind guide his next move, and takes on anyone that dares to oppress those living by their own means. His cool demeanor, razor-sharp edge design, and race car-like clashing colors of red, white, and blue tell you pretty much everything you need to know about this guy. Every story needs a villain though, and cue in Dr. Evil Robotnik, mad scientist extraordinaire.
Those fools are no match for me.
He puts the wild animals he finds into robots that serve his every whim and act as security detail for his many industrial jobs that seek to transform the greenery of the world into a mechanical paradise. Robotnik is a man that ironically believes the world is beautiful, wanting to see it prosper and live on forever, despite his questionable methods. Sonic the Hedgehog 1 is a simple tale of two opposing sides fighting for what they believe in. The freedom of all life to choose its destiny versus the freedom to control destinies if it means a better life for all involved. As he progresses through each zone, Sonic comes across these 6 gems called the Chaos Emeralds that he can collect after entering something called the Special Zone. I have a whole video on the Special Zone and how exactly Sonic uses them, so I'll be sure to link it via card at the top right space of your screen right now. All you need to know about the Chaos Emeralds for the first game is that they're needed for the good ending. Now, this is about as traditional as a hero versus villain story can get, so Sonic ends up crashing Robotnik's plans and restoring all of the damage he's done to the environments you travel through with the aforementioned Chaos Emeralds. Little did our Hedgehog know though, Robotnik was not one to give up so easily. A persistence that would surely prove to result in one of the greatest rivalries ever. It's 1992 now, and Sonic is hot on the trail of yet another one of Robotnik's schemes. This time though, it's just shy of the previous location and the story takes place on the aptly named Westside Island. But you have to put a pin in that however. Why, I can hear you asking? Well, it's because there's one game released in 1993 that would like to have a word with you. Introducing Sonic CD. Technically the second game in the timeline, even though there's a third release overall, but what's more important is that the characters and plot that take center stage in the story. Dr. Robotnik has discovered even more gems that rival and even possibly surpass the previously discovered Chaos Emeralds. Opening up the floor, I'd like to introduce you all to the Time Stones, magical gems the Doctor researched and located on Little Planet, a planetoid that visits Sonic's world annually, typically on the very last month of each calendar year. The amount of time Little Planet is observable is not long at all, and considering it is the only place where the Time Stones can be located, Dr. Robotnik has to act fast. So, he does what any good mad scientist would do. Chains a living planet to another living planet and makes it his prisoner. Our resident speedster, Sonic, catches wind of this and sets off to investigate. At the same time, a young girl with an affinity for all things spiritual does a tarot reading for herself and comes to realize that she's destined to meet her fated knight during the arrival of Little Planet. Amy Rose, Sonic's #1 fan and, depending on who you ask, hinted at love interest.
We've gotta do our best!
She's a pink hedgehog with a go-getter attitude, massive hammer, and sets out to ensure everyone she comes across gets whatever help she can provide. Sort of like another hedgehog we know, huh? The main shtick of Little Planet is that it does not abide by the natural laws of time, making it so you can view the past, present, and future at will if you can gather enough speed, or utilize the Time Stones as a taxi. Seeing as Robotnik has already made quite a bit of a mechanical dent in the planetoid, when Sonic uses the aforementioned travel methods, he sees what is to become of this place if the Doctor succeeds. It's his job to head to the exact point where the Doctor's evil deeds began and stop them from ever being put into motion. A literal race against time, where the Hedgehog will get more than he bargained for. During the adventure, Sonic finally meets Amy and Robotnik sees her as the perfect checkmate to destroy our hero once and for all by using a robotic doppelganger appropriately named Metal Sonic. A unit that matches everything his organic counterpart can do and is a spitting image of Sonic's cocky attitude and love of all things for speed. One might even say he's the perfect copy. I'll be calling him just Metal for the rest of the video since his full name can be a bit redundant when speaking about him and the real Sonic in tandem. Either way, Robotnik sends Metal to abduct Amy, and now our blue guy has 3 directives. Rescue Amy, restore a little planet back to its former glory, and take down the villainous duo for what will most certainly not be the last time. Sonic, of course, being the hero he is, completes all of these and after setting Amy down in a safe enough spot, continues on his way to the next adventure. Speaking of which, we can flash back to the past and finally speak about Sonic 2, the second game ever properly released, but third in the timeline. Just don't worry about that too much since there will be plenty of more confusing time jumps. Riding around in the passenger seat this time is Miles Prower, or as everyone in the series would come to call him, Tails.
Ain't gonna lose this time!
A kid fox that just so happens to be born with a genetic mutation giving him 2, well, tails that he can fly with. He joins up with Sonic after the Hedgehog catches our resident flyboy checking out his biplane dubbed the Tornado, a vehicle that would soon enough be more related to Tails than Sonic in subsequent games. Even though he was often bullied as a kid and lacked any sense of security within himself, Sonic's magnetic personality, confidence, and carefree attitude drew the Kid Fox to his side almost immediately, allowing for companionship or brotherhood that rivals even that of another famous gaming duo to be formed. An adventure similar to the original, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 ups the scale of Robotnik's world domination plans and takes them to space. The Death Egg, hosting some similarities to another spherical space station, is the good doctor's magnum opus that he intends to use as a tactic to force the world into submission and begin reign over all those below. Luckily for us, the new dynamic duo of Sonic and Tails are hot on the scene, but they're gonna need a little bit of help. Remember the Chaos Emeralds from Sonic the Hedgehog 1? So apparently there's actually 7 of them, and the missing one was just chilling over here on Westside Island, but called out to the other 6 gems at the end of the first game, hence why you must once again collect the stones. Same as the first game, you'll need the emerald to get the good ending and also have the story events leading into the next numbered entry make sense. Why is this? Well, only because Sonic tapped into his inner anime protagonist and achieved Super Sonic.
Now I'll show you!
A form that enhances all of the Hedgehog's basic abilities and makes him invulnerable to all forms of damage. At least until he runs out of rings, that is. Or gets crushed. Or falls in a bottomless pit. With this newfound power, Sonic manages to decommission the Death Egg and send it crashing back down to Earth. But knows Robotnik hasn't completely given up yet, thus a chase ensues. Little did our heroic duo know, but they were about to come into contact with a ground so ancient it revolutionized their whole world perspective, opening a can of worms for lore enthusiasts both in and out of the franchise. 1994 comes quicker than anyone anticipates, and with it, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles. The and Knuckles part may be a tad confusing, but all you need to know is that this is one of the earliest forms of DLC or expansion packs in the Sonic the Hedgehog series. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was a game so massive in scale and scope compared to its older siblings that it required the experience to be split into 2 separate adventures, spanning every inch of the setting this journey would take our heroes on. Where is this setting exactly? I'd like to welcome you all to the floating continent of Angel Island, a land once lost to time, residence of one of the most powerful artifacts in the mythos, and home to the last guardian of a people who once bustled all throughout its many crevices. Meet Knuckles the Echidna.
Give it your best shot!
A warrior hailing from a long line of battle-proficient hunters that can be a bit naive and too trusting of people due to him spending so much time alone on the island. The Red Echidna is also hot-headed in scenarios that he can't quite understand, but he has a good heart and often will go the extra mile for people or things that he cares about protecting. Robotnik managed to arrive on Angel Island before Sonic and Tails in his escape efforts from Sonic 2. This allowed ample time to trick Knuckles, begin rebuilding his glorious space station, and research the mysterious location's power source, the Master Emerald, which, if the name gave it away, is a stone that can command all the Chaos Emeralds, which are also now here, by the way. Yeah, these things, they travel around quite a bit. Their job must have a good PTO package, I don't know what to tell you. Upon arriving at Angel Island for the first time, Sonic, who is still in his super form from the good ending of Sonic 2, and Tails run into Knuckles. Although, I believe a more appropriate term is that Knuckles' fist run into Sonic, causing all of the Chaos Emeralds to be knocked out of the Hedgehog, something thought never possible before. Mr. Strongman Knuckles takes off with the emeralds and is soon after discovered that he's working with Robotnik, as the Doctor has convinced him that our Hedgehog and Fox combination are here to steal the Master Emerald. Hold on to that for me, will ya? The same song and dance commence, with Sonic gathering back the Chaos Emeralds and finally confronting the Echidna and Doctor together. In the midst of blue and red clashing, Robotnik himself finally enacts his true plan, robbing Angel Island of the Master Emerald and using it to power the rebuilt Death Egg. It's no different than what he's done before, however, right? Strangely, it wouldn't be, only if this one specific emerald wasn't the reason why Angel Island could float in the first place. Out of breath, out of time, and realizing he was out of his goddamn mind, Knuckles turns to the same person he'd been being a nuisance to this entire time in one last-ditch effort to save his home from crashing into the waves below. Sonic, as the stand-up guy that he is, takes on the challenge and pursues the reignited Death Egg, stumbling across many of Robotnik's forces along the way that include a seemingly new version of his doppelganger series of robots. After boarding the space station, the Hedgehog closes in on the Doctor and the final showdown begins. Destroyed contraption after destroyed contraption, the only thing left standing between Sonic and returning the Master Emerald to Knuckles is Robotnik's final stand, attempting to escape into the deep reaches of space with the stone. Nothing escapes the fastest thing alive though, especially not when he's powered up in a super form to boot. With the good Doctor, who knows where, and the Master Emerald returned, Sonic and Tails set sail to wherever the wind will take them and bid Knuckles farewell, creating an unspoken bond and newly built trust between the three that'll set them up for life. So, the mainline Sonic the Hedgehog mythos kinda takes a back seat there. From 1995 and onwards, there are quite a number of side games, some that focus on the Big Blue Man himself, others that feature prominent roles for Tails or Knuckles, and even a couple of wild spin-offs. These all take place leading up to the gaming revolution that's soon to come, but as far as pushing the needle forward for the overall narrative, not much happens. A couple of games that deserve a spotlight though are Knuckles' Chaotix and Sonic the Fighters, two titles that either introduced or reintroduced characters into the spotlight, but a majority of these would either be left in 90s era jail for way too long, or revamped in future releases. Tackling Knuckles' Chaotix first, this entry brings into the spotlight Mighty the Armadillo, Vector the Crocodile, Espio the Chameleon, and Charmy Bee. While this game largely got swept under the rug back in the day, the plot is quite similar to that of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, where Robotnik has located the magic MacGuffins on a new mysterious location and our Red Echidna must venture out to stop him before the events can repeat themselves. Along the way, he meets all of the aforementioned members, and together they form the Chaotix, a team that something tells me will see some restructuring in the future. Next up is Sonic the Fighters, the first of only 2 attempts by anyone to create an official Sonic the Hedgehog fighting game if you can believe it. Here we have Knack the Weasel, or Fang the Sniper if you're feeling dangerous, he doesn't mind, Bean the Dynamite, and Bark the Polar Bear, who are all accompanied by heroes from the previous games. In true fighting game fashion, all 8 total fighters are here for their own reasons, some to put a stop to Robotnik's evil scheme, others to simply gather all 8 emeralds. Yes, I said 8, but trust me, just don't worry about it. And some really just here for the love of the game. Both before and after these entries, many more Sonic games would release, but we want everything here to be streamlined. Similar plots will be found in all the titles from this era, with Robotnik finding somehow, some way, to give the old world domination plot another go, and the blue blur will be right there to put a stop to it before all too long. What put Sonic the Hedgehog on the map during this era was an attitude that fit the bill, a demeanor that required players to respect it and the full package that came alongside it. He and his crew came in swinging with immaculate vibes, a gameplay style that dared to be different while offering an addictive loop, and perhaps most importantly for his identity, music that connects you to the character. As I alluded to earlier, the music found throughout Sonic games from this era of gaming pushed an envelope in the space where other mascots at the time were still going with very obvious stage and theme cohesion. This series about a cocky blue rodent that can run at the speed of sound opted in for using jazz, hip-hop, rock, and electronic music samples, when most soundtracks at the time chose to play things safe. The Hedgehog's franchise chose to move the needle on what it meant to have gaming music reflect the attitude, stories, and themes of its main character. Something that would become oh so painfully obvious in the coming journey to the beginning of a new millennium. A force of nature that wouldn't be oppressed by those looking to spread evil. A being who dared to travel against the grain to stand up for what he believed in. Someone that arguably inspired a generation of revolutionists that wanted to see the world as free as the wind. A rebel.
And this is the great American game. Oh, too loud, too reckless, too ghetto. Mr. Lamar, do you really know how to play the game? Then tighten up.
If Sonic's attitude before he got a voice didn't convince you that this was a guy with too much to say, the transformation from a 2D plane into a 3D one surely will. Right off the bat, I am somewhat cheating here since the first 3D game that most people will care extremely deeply about dropped in 1998, but it's an entry that's largely considered to be part of the next group we're diving into. With that out of the way, however, Sonic Adventure is currently taking the stage. A revolutionary title that gave the Sonic cast a voice and put them into an interconnected story that has been in the works for over 1,000 years. You'll find that much of the characters from the 2D games have made their reappearance here and all have personalities that are befitting of them and what you already know thus far. Sonic can finally put his sass where his mouth is and takes any opportunity to crack one-liners while trying to stop the Doctor's plans. Tails, still putting his best foot forward, trying to prove himself that he's capable and confident enough to be a great hero in his own right. Knuckles, tagging along in the story since not only has the Master Emerald shattered, forcing him to collect the pieces and put it back together again, but a mysterious monster has emerged from it as well. Amy, looking for that adventure high that she got from being with our blue boy back in Sonic CD, but also learning not to depend on others to make something of her life. And Dr. Robotnik, who, starting in this game, I'll be referring to as Eggman, a nickname that Sonic rightfully gives him considering he's shaped like one and just to piss the Doctor off to boot. Eggman is the reason why Knuckles' Master Emerald broke and unleashed the unknown monster I mentioned earlier for some evil scheme. There are also some newcomers here that are more than worth a mention. Big the Cat has entered the chat.
Froggy, wait up!
He's just a guy that loves fishing almost as much as he loves his best friend, Froggy, whom he lives with. At least until the amphibian wanders off and gets himself abducted by one of Eggman's robots, and it's up to the purple guy to play a game of cat and mouse until they're reunited. Speaking of said robot abductor, that was the top of the line unit E-102 Gamma.
Resistance is futile. Give me the bird.
He hails from a special line of advanced machines that Eggman is built to take on more nuanced tasks than what he would usually ask of the regular robots you can find in many of the playable stages. Although later on in the campaign he rebels against his creator in efforts to free his robot brethren, the very first objective he received upon waking up was to capture, you guessed it, Froggy. Only because the little guy happened to swallow a Chaos Emerald though, of course, and Eggman needs all 7 of the gems to complete his latest and greatest master plan. To fully unleash and control the God of Destruction, Chaos, the being that was trapped within the Master Emerald. Several times throughout the story, all of these characters will interact with one another in various ways, but each still has their own goals that they're trying to achieve, like I stated earlier. In addition, though all, with the exception of Eggman, interact with the other entity released when the Master Emerald broke, named Twinkle.
Hello there, friend. How are you?
She's quite literally and figuratively a guiding light for the characters, often giving them bits and pieces to the overarching story. You see, she's an echidna like Knuckles, but from a time long gone. The echidna tribe of her time were warring with neighboring villages and wanted absolute power to topple their enemies and establish dominance. To acquire such a power, they felt a need for the Master and all 7 Chaos Emeralds, but little did they know that greed would cause the near mass extinction of their people. Chaos was sort of one half of the protectors of all the gems during this time period, a duty that he shared with Twinkle in some ways. During the Echidna tribe's invasion of the altar where the stones lay, several of these adorable animals named Chow were caught in the crossfire, ultimately leading to an untimely demise for the Guppies. Chaos himself is in fact a mutated Chow and designated protector of his comrades, so you can see exactly why he would get as angry as he did. By the time our present day heroes are done piecing the story together, however, Chaos has collected all of the emeralds and transformed into his final form, Perfect Chaos, hell-bent on destroying the world like he almost did in the days of old. Sonic is able to transform back into Super Sonic though, and purify the negative emotions that Chaos had from way back then, so that way he goes back into his positive mind state. With yet another day saved, Sonic speeds off to the next adventure before anyone has a chance to get another word in. Luckily, from here on out, and typically, the formula follows something along the lines of Eggman discovers some ancient entity, new technology, or power source that he wants to use to build his ultimate Eggman Land theme park. But things go awry near the tail end, with Sonic in the game being responsible for cleaning up his mess. Something that happens in the sequel to Sonic Adventure, aptly named Sonic Adventure 2. Two sides, good and evil, with their story titles appropriately named Hero and Dark. The Dark Side story sees Eggman teaming up with newcomers to the series, Shadow the Hedgehog,
I am the ultimate life form.
and Rouge the Bat,
This should be a piece of cake.
a mysterious figure that the Doctor released from a government facility after learning about him from his grandfather's journal, and a jewel-loving undercover agent sent by said government to see what she could find out about Eggman's next greatest plan. Upon waking up, Shadow tells the Doctor that he can grant his wish of world domination if he collects the 7 Chaos Emeralds and powers up the Eclipse Cannon, a weapon designed by Gerald Robotnik. While Eggman starts tracking the gems, Shadow winds up causing chaos in the city, and somehow people are convinced that Sonic is the one stirring up trouble, which leads to the Blue Blur's arrest. At the same time, Tails believes something to be amiss with his friend's conviction, thus heads out to the scene to break him out. And Knuckles is busy shattering the Master Emerald again to prevent it from being stolen, thus setting him off on a journey to collect the pieces once more. Yeah, they don't exactly go into detail about why Chaos never shows up in the story since the Master Emerald is broken, but that's beside the point. Sonic and crew must find a way to clear the Hedgehog's name, stop the Darkside crew from doing any more damage with their new toys, and find out the mystery behind Shadow. Speaking of, near somewhere in the middle of and leading all the way up until the end of the story, it's discovered that Shadow is the ultimate life form created by Eggman's grandfather, Professor Gerald Robotnik. Shadow has the sole mission of destroying the world due to the military of this franchise, the Guardian Union of Nations, or GUN, murdering a small child named Maria in cold blood, a close friend and dare I say sister to Shadow. When the Dark Trio finally gets all 7 Chaos Emeralds, Eggman powers up the Eclipse Cannon, but then something happens. Gerald Robotnik pops up on screens all around the world declaring that this was his final mission, to crash the Ark, which the Eclipse Cannon can be found on, into the Earth, thus destroying all human life. With the heroes now having a reason to spring into action faster than ever before, it's up to them to get to the core of the Ark and make sure that they can stop the event from happening altogether. Thanks to some convincing from Amy though, the Black Hedgehog takes a moment and remembers that Maria in her final words never wanted him to take revenge. That was all a ploy implemented by Gerald. But instead, she wanted him to give the people of Earth the opportunities to be happy that she never had. So, teaming up with Sonic, the two Hogs crank it and go super to save the day from a failsafe that Gerald implemented in the slight chance that Shadow changed his mind and remember what Maria's true wishes were. And real quick, the story of SA2 is layers deep and way more complex than I could feasibly fit into a video like this. A story of SA2's caliber is highly regarded in the community, and I think that everyone should experience in some capacity if given the chance. So definitely play it at some point. And oh yeah, Shadow dies here by sacrificing himself, but don't miss him too much, because he comes right back in the next entry, Sonic Heroes. A game that introduces and reintroduces several characters into the overarching story, and speaking of which, the lore this time around more so has to do with just Sonic. But before we get to why that is, there's some folks that require your attention. Let's start from right to left since we technically haven't seen these guys in about 8 years. Team Chaotix makes their reappearance back into the spotlight since Knuckles is Chaotix way back in 1995, but you'll see the restructuring that I pointed out earlier has finally taken place. Knuckles is over with Team Sonic and Mighty Their Armadillo is nowhere to be found. Long story short, the developers wanted to bring some of the classic characters back into the limelight, and these 3 were the top contenders for that spot, with the group now forming the Chaotix Detective Agency. Their ragtag formation sees Vector as the lead detective,
Anytime you're ready.
Espio as reconnaissance,
Behold ninja power.
and Charmy as... Charmy.
Now I'm mad!
Then we have Team Rose, helmed by Amy Rose, supported by newcomer Cream the Rabbit,
Let's do our best!
making her first playable 3D appearance, you'll see why I mentioned that in a second, and Big the Cat. Thirdly is Team Dark, created by Rouge the Bat, newcomer E123 Omega,
I am Omega, the ultimate E-Series robot.
and Shadow the Hedgehog of all people, who has risen from the dead somehow? And last but not least is Team Sonic, with the main blue guy himself, Tails, and Knuckles once again banding together like in the previous entry on this list. Sonic Heroes' story is one that is told in 4 parts, one for each team. Team Sonic sets out to stop Eggman's world domination plan. Each member of Team Dark has their own motive, with Shadow wanting answers about his amnesia due to the fall he took at the end of SA2, Omega is seeking revenge on Eggman for locking him away as a watchdog inside of the Ultimate Battle Unit, and Rouge is honestly just here because she was searching for the Doctor's secret treasure. Team Rose links up so that Amy can assist Cream in finding her child friend, Chocola, and Big is in the same boat since Froggy has gone missing yet again. Finally, we come full circle back to Team Chaotix, who as a financially struggling agency receives work from a mysterious client that promises a hefty reward if they're successful in all their tasks. Over the course of the story, bits and pieces of the overarching narrative are given, and at the very end, it's discovered by Team Chaotix that Eggman was imprisoned by Metal Sonic. The robot used the interactions with each team to gather their biodata, with Sonic and Shadow being the most prominent, additionally revealing that he was the one who had actually stolen Chocola and Froggy in order to get their DNA, which linked back to Chaos from Sonic Adventure. After transforming into what seems like an unstoppable force, each of the teams put aside their differences and work together to take down Metal Sonic's new form, capping off with Sonic going super and receiving assistance from Tails and Knuckles. The day is obviously saved again, with the Blue Blur offering his robotic doppelganger a rematch before running off as per usual. So, the Sonic series was also on the Game Boy Advance back in the day, and those stories ran parallel to their home console counterparts, but for the most part, they're self-contained with only a couple of callbacks to their foundations here and there. I'll keep this brief. Sonic Advance 1 served as the first 2D title for the new Millennium and was to induct anyone new to the franchise into the classic style of gameplay. This game's story is about as close to the original trilogy that we get for a while. Sonic Advance 2 lore is another game where Cream the Rabbit is introduced to players for the first time ever, and she's technically the main protagonist here. She's trying to save her mother Vanilla, who was abducted by Eggman for some animal-powered weapon he's working on, with Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles just hitching along for the ride and to get payback on Eggman for abducting or tricking them as well. A title dubbed Sonic Battle takes place next. Well, sort of, since it's a bit confusing on when exactly this game and the next big 3D game we're covering are happening, as they cover very similar topics for a certain character. Sonic Battle is a fighting game that sees an ancient war unit named Emerald take center stage as the protagonist. This robot can copy the fighting moves of all those it comes across, being constructed as the perfect entity for battle. Through interactions with Sonic and the main cast, Emerald learns that life is full of adventure and he doesn't have to succumb to whatever programs he may have been instilled with that may dictate otherwise. Eggman, of course, gets in the way of the happy ending for everyone and overrides the hard work of everyone involved, reverting Emerald's code to that of his war unit origins. It's up to Sonic to put the bot out of commission, as there's no other way to stop him, leaving the entire main cast distraught and unsure of where things will take them next, which is a nice contrast to how these games usually end. Rounding out this quartet of games, we have Sonic Advance 3, an entry that's a direct sequel to Sonic Battle, as Eggman has taken inspiration from notes jotted down about Emerald's framework and created Gemroll. After many a battle with this new duo, our heroes corner the villains and, surprise surprise, another one of the good Doctor's robots turn on him and take the Chaos Emeralds for themselves to transform into an entity capable of destroying the world. Sonic, ever so brilliant at his job, and Eggman team up to take down the robot and after a successful battle, come across the unit laid out on a beach. Tails takes it upon himself to rewire Gemroll so he's on the good guy's side now, and hands him over to Cream and Vanilla as a bodyguard for the Rabbit family. However, with those out of the way, we finally make our way back to the 3D side of things with Shadow the Hedgehog. This game continues Shadow's side of the subplot that Team Dark was going through back in Sonic Heroes, and the entirety of this game is supposed to show an alternate version of conclusions that the Dark Hero comes to about gaining answers when it comes to his past. The foundation, though, is that an elite alien race dubbed the Black Arms begins their invasion of Earth, led by the space warlord Black Doom.
Destroy those insolent fools. Make the humans suffer.
Shadow is goaded into action by Black Doom as the Warlord claims to know the answers behind what he wants to know most: circumstances surrounding the Hedgehog's birth, previous life, and purpose in the world. Players can choose a number of storylines to follow, and it's a heavily debated topic on what is the canon path that Shadow takes, but there are two events we know concretely happen within this game. Shadow being spurred into action by Black Doom to begin tracking down the Chaos Emeralds, and then the final story section. Speaking of, the last story of Shadow the Hedgehog shows that the titular protagonist does gather the Chaos Emeralds as a bargaining chip with Black Doom. But before a trade-off can occur, Sonic, Eggman, and the rest of the cast reveal the truth behind what the aliens are here to do: harvest Earth. Too little too late, however, Black Doom utilizes a noxious gas to freeze everyone in place, take the Chaos Emeralds from Shadow, and teleports the Black Comet, which is the Black Arm's base, down to Earth's surface so that the harvest may begin. Shadow is able to break free from the control, because he's just that guy, and pursue Black Doom one final time. Here's where the Hedgehog learns that he's got Black Arm DNA within him, as Professor Gerald made a deal with the alien warlord, trading some of his blood in order for the promise that Black Doom could conquer Earth. Gotta say, this old man was insane even before he was sentenced to death, but maybe that's just me. As such, Black Doom is able to stop Shadow dead in his tracks, forcing him to watch as his planet is consumed. Just then though, the anti-hero gets the pep talk he needs from pre-recorded footage of Gerald and Maria, reassuring him that even though he may have been created using less than conventionally good means, he was always meant to be the protector of Earth. Thus, our Black Hedgehog turns super and takes to the sky above to battle Black Doom and prevent the harvesting of Earth. As always, the small animals come out victorious, saving the day by transporting the Black Comet in front of the Eclipse Cannon that Team Chaotix just happened to fire off. These guys just end up everywhere, honestly. At the end of it all, Shadow the Hedgehog caps off his story with a renewed sense of self, leaving the past behind and deciding that it's his path to forge forward, protecting the world in ways that best serve the greater good of humanity. Similar story beats would take place up next with Sonic Rush. Introducing Blaze.
I'll be on my way.
A purple cat that possesses pyrokinetic abilities shows up unexpectedly after Sonic is done having a showdown with Eggman and snags the emerald that was dropped in the midst of the battle. Rightfully confused, Sonic sets out to see if anyone has any info on who this figure is and what her connection to the Doctor stems from. On the other side of the pond though, Blaze awakens in a mysterious land, only remembering that she was chasing someone with a mustache, and after a bright flash, she found herself here. Exploring the surroundings and coming to the understanding that she was somehow transported to another world, the cat runs into Cream and Cheese. These two would subsequently tag along for the ride, much to Blaze's dismay at first, as a guide for their new friend. Blaze is both princess and protector of the Soul Dimension and Soul Emeralds respectively, but her sense of duty and devotion to both of those things has caged her emotions off, unfortunately leading to a lack of understanding when it comes to building relationships. The place she calls home and the gyms she presides over all act as an alternate reality version of the same things you'd find in Sonic's world, with Blaze specifically being touted as Sonic's equal, yet additionally taking up the responsibilities such as that of a Knuckles or a Shadow, and the Soul Emeralds being just as powerful as the Chaos Emeralds. Unlucky for her though, she wasn't the only person brought over from this other dimension. Her main villain, appropriately named Eggman Nega, and Sonic's Eggman team up to combine the Chaos and Soul Emerald's power in an attempt for the two Doctors to rule both worlds as they wish and build an interdimensional Eggman land. That's the second time we've heard about this dream to create an amusement park. Several misunderstandings are had between our boy Sonic and the purple cat from another dimension, one of which sees their disagreements devolve into a fight, but all that goes out of the window when Cream gets kidnapped by the Eggman and the two work together to save the rabbit. Now, that should be the end of the story, right? Well, as one last ploy by the villains, they hijack the Soul Emeralds from Blaze, and generate an interdimensional rift that's going to crash Blaze's world into Sonic's, creating the cataclysmic destruction of both dimensions. Sonic and the rest of the cast find an emotionally defeated Blaze and drained Soul Emeralds, but reassure her that she can deepen her connection to the Soul Emeralds, channeling and becoming one with their energy to tap into their full potential. The blue guy does the same with the Chaos Emeralds, transforming them into Super Sonic and Burning Blaze. Dr. Eggman and Eggman Nega are taken care of within a 30-minute lunch break, as the separate dimensions begin to fix themselves. Sonic and Blaze say not goodbye, but instead, see you later, with the promise that they'll meet again soon. but I don't quite think they understand in just what way that reunion is going to take place. So, welcome to 2006, everyone. Big year for the franchise, with this year signifying the 15th active anniversary, and that's no small feat for the mascot series. These next 12 months for Sonic would see more than a number of titles released, but for the sake of, once again, keeping things nice and tidy, we're focusing on 2 games that dropped back to back, but we'll circle back around to the others a bit later. Enter Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic Rivals. Wait, just let me fix that. Okay, gotcha. There you go. Yeah, I'm sure most people know the real-world context around this game, but if you don't, Sonic the Hedgehog, 2006 in parentheses, was supposed to be a revitalization of the entire Sonic franchise. A reboot of sorts, if you will. New art style, a soft reintroducing of the characters and their affiliations, along with a brand new character in the form of my guy, Silver the Hedgehog.
That's it.
A psychokinetic hero from about 200 years in the future that travels back to Sonic's time in hopes of finding an answer to finally rid his timeline of an ever-present threat in the form of the Flames of Disaster, Iblis. Think of Iblis as sort of akin to Chaos from Sonic Adventure, but more animalistic, actually destroying the whole world, and on fire instead of water. Sonic 06, as the community calls it, is one of the more intricate stories in the series, but seeing as this is a beginner's guide, I'll try to streamline as much as possible. Sonic is just that guy who ends up being in the middle of things that he has no business being in, but always takes it upon himself to lend out a helping hand. Where he finds himself this time is the beautiful city-state of Soliana, a location that currently finds itself in the middle of celebrating the Festival of the Sun. Dr. Eggman crashes the party and attempts to kidnap Princess Elise, the nation's leader, as she possesses a Chaos Emerald and is the key to something else that he's been researching as well. Our resident Blue Hedgehog interrupts, of course, and the hero-villain pair do their typical dance, but then the Doctor is successful in kidnapping the princess. Before the scene ends though, someone can be seen in the distance. The rest of Sonic's story is a classic case of bonding, rescuing, and subsequently losing Princess Elise to Eggman, with crossovers working alongside Shadow and Rouge, and interruptions from Silver a couple of times who exclaims that he wants Sonic dead of all things. Wonder what that's about. Through much trial and tribulation though, Sonic and Eggman have one final bout in the sky for all the marbles, but we know how this ends at this point. Sonic and Elise just barely manage to escape the collapsing battleship they were on, have a good laugh, and their story concludes for now. This is Shadow. We know him, we love him, and he's arguably the biggest star of this entire game. That's accounting for the fact that there's a new time-traveling hedgehog in the mix, but what more could Shadow possibly be trying to accomplish after the big adventure that was his standalone game? Well, he works for Gun now along with Rouge. A decision that probably didn't come easy to him, although the thought process was most likely something along the lines of, I can better uphold my promise to Maria of protecting the world and keep a close eye on this organization so that what happened on the Ark 50 years ago never happens again. Now that we've established that, Shadow saves Rouge from Eggman's base and they're both tasked with returning the artifact she stole to Gun, an item called the Scepter of Darkness. Eggman intercepts them, trying to get his item back, and in the scuffle, the Scepter of Darkness breaks, unleashing a malevolent energy that scares even the Doctor away. Once this energy absorbs Shadow's shadow, it takes the form of our anti-hero and introduces itself as Metropolis the Dark.
Oh, how ironic fate can be.
An entity that seemingly knows the Black Hedgehog and promises to repay a debt that Shadow gave him in the past. Apparently stranding our duo in the far future, it isn't long until they have the lucky break and run into Team Sonic. And once a means to get back to the present is finally obtained, everyone except Shadow returns, as he stays behind to get answers from and battle Metropolis, who is in the immediate area. Before the two fight, the Dark Entity tells Shadow that humanity turns against him again in the future, and that they should work together to ensure that such a thing never comes to fruition, striking the humans before they even have a chance to come to that conclusion. By this point though, and as we already discussed in the end of his own game, Shadow knows who he is and states that his destiny can't be forged by anyone but himself. Oh, hi Omega! E123 Omega provides assistance to his friend. Both of them follow Metropolis into a time portal, but lose him, and upon returning to the past, Shadow decides to chase down Dr. Eggman for more answers. Finally reaching him, the two old comrades exchange info about the origins of the entity, and come to an understanding that Metropolis needs to be contained at all costs. Before he can do that though, Shadow has to stop Sonic from getting waffle stomped by Silver. Those guys fight, yet Shadow is able to convince the futuristic Hedgehog to follow him into the past and experience an incident involving something called the Solaris Project that occurred 10 years prior. The two Hogs discover that Elise's father, the Duke of Soliana, was attempting to harness the power of their nation's god, Solaris, to claim control over time and resurrect his wife and Elise's mother. Of course, the experiment ends in a disaster, and we learn that Metropolis is one half of said god. The explosion leaves Shadow to track down the primordial form of his foe and Silver his. Now, we come full circle to the event that Metropolis alluded to at the beginning of Shadow's story. The debt that he was to repay was being the one responsible for sealing the dark entity within the Scepter of Darkness initially. Our anti-hero and Silver meet back up once all loose ends are tied, hop into the time portal, and begin the next steps of their journey. For Shadow, it involves locating Omega, who's gone rogue and tracked down Metropolis alone. Failing to capture Metropolis, the three members of Team Dark sit on the Soliana beach and the robot reveals to his organic friends that humanity reprogrammed him to be the one that imprisoned Shadow in the future. While the scene gets a bit tense, Rouge steps in to remind Shadow that even though the world may turn their back on him, she'll forever be by his side no matter what happens. With that addressed, the three teammates head off into the desert with a plan for one final confrontation with Darkness incarnated. Offering one last chance for an alliance to be formed, Metropolis attempts to goad Shadow to his side, but then the Dark Hero drops one of the coldest lines in Sonic history.
If the world chooses to become my enemy, I will fight like I always have.
With that, we'll have to wait and see if Team Dark was successful in their attempts, but in the time being... Alright, so we already know who this guy is. Futuristic Hedgehog wants to save his timeline from the Eternal Flame, Iblis, the whole nine. What's exactly his deal though? Being in a distraught future for so long has worn its wear on Silver, and he's one of the only people left that have a chance to even remotely challenge Iblis. The other person is Blaze, but for spoiler's sake, just don't take her being here too seriously. This iteration of the character doesn't know who Sonic is and vice versa, but that won't exactly matter once it's all said and done. Duking it out in yet another battle with the monster, Silver's frustration with Iblis returning time and time again has finally reached its pinnacle, but then a familiar face shows up and offers a solution. Metropolis is here and teaches the pairing that all things have an origin, insinuating that the best way to snuff out something for good is to travel to the point of that origin and erase it from ever becoming an issue. What or who is this point of origin, you may be asking? Ironically, Metropolis points to none other than our resident blue hedgehog, Sonic. Sending Silver and Blaze to the past with a mission to end Sonic's life, the rest of their story will follow just that. Being stopped on numerous occasions from completing his mission by both Amy, whom Silver was traveling with, and Shadow, as we discussed previously, the futuristic Hedgehog began to have doubts about if what he was trying to accomplish was the right thing to do. A thought that would only get solidified once he finally goes to the past with Shadow, tracks down the primordial form of Iblis, and witnesses the Duke of Soliana sealing the monster within his daughter, Elise, instructing her to never cry, lest the monster be unleashed onto the world. Coming to understand that him killing Sonic would force Elise into an unstable mind state, thus unleashing Iblis upon the world anyway, Silver makes it his duty to assist the Blue Blur with saving the princess, then handling the issues of his timeline with the newfound technique that he learned from his time in the past with Shadow. Silver and Blaze confront Iblis one final time, but as the White Hedgehog isn't considered as a suitable vessel for the flames of a disaster, Blaze is though, as she still hails from royalty in this iteration, and of course her pyrokinesis is a plus. As Silver's best and only friend takes in Iblis' soul, she fades into the sky and disappears from this timeline entirely, leaving a distraught Silver in her wake. Told you this story was intricate. We're almost at the finish line for this game though. As Sonic and Elise are returning from their harrowing escape aboard Dr. Eggman's ship, they're blinded by a Chaos Emerald. A distraction, no less, set up by Metropolis in order to open up Sonic enough so that he can stab him through the chest. Yeah, the first and only time that Sonic the Hedgehog just straight up dies in a game, and if you've been paying attention, you know what that means. Elise cries, Iblis is released, and Metropolis is able to rejoin with his other half, forming the sun god Solaris, who then proceeds to deconstruct time itself and rip apart every possible reality. Somehow, all of the cast in this game end up in the same location and discover that their friend is in fact no longer with them. However, just as the dust begins to settle, Silver comes up with an idea that defeating their enemy in the past, present, and future should undo all of the damage done by Solaris. This, being accomplished, is going to take the 7 Chaos Emeralds first, which should be able to bring Sonic back to life if Elise is the one making the wish. And I don't believe this is something that's ever been stated that the gems can do, but we have a plan. Once that mission is complete, the blue guy actually gets revived, which is crazy that this had to be the method of revival, and shares his chaos energy with Shadow and Silver, all three setting off to destroy Solaris once and for all. We've been here before, and the Sonic thing happens, defeating the big bad, but the day's not won just yet. Elise and Sonic travel back to before the Solaris Project incident and reluctantly come to the decision to blow out Iblis as a baby flame, making it so all of the tragic events never take place to begin with. Meaning, this game never technically happens. Silver never goes to the past, Dr. Eggman never travels to Soliana, Shadow never unleashes or meets Metropolis, even though that'll be kinda retconned in the future, and we're unsure if the whole Blaze sacrificing herself thing gets undone or not. Infuriating? Oh, absolutely. But fortunately, you're learning this in a video and not in real time when the game first comes out. All we do know though is that Sonic still travels to Soliana to see the festival, yet doesn't formally meet Elise in any capacity. Perhaps the best, concerning what happened last time when they'd only known each other for like 2 days, but that officially wraps up the story of Sonic 06. There was one more game released in 2006 though, that being Sonic Rivals. So while this game released before Sonic 06, the story events make much more sense if you think about it as having been released afterwards for reasons I'll go into now. Sonic, Knuckles, Shadow, and Silver are the main adventurers this time, but the white futuristic hedgehog takes the cake as far as the level of importance in this story specifically. This game serves as his formal reintroduction into the franchise, seeing as 06's story was retconned into never happening. 3 of the characters I've mentioned thus far are hunting down Eggman, as his latest scheme involved him turning things important to them into a card, a feat that was achieved via a mysterious camera. The victims in this instance are Amy and Tails in the case of Sonic, Rouge in Shadow's case, and the Master Emerald for Knuckles. On the other hand, Silver is chasing the Doctor since the camera he's in possession of actually comes from the future and was stolen by none other than Eggman Nega, who we find out in this game doesn't even come from Blaze's dimension like initially believed. Instead, he's from Silver's future and is a direct descendant of the Dr. Eggman we know. And speaking of our beloved Doctor, we discover that he's being impersonated by his many a great grandson, who turned him into a card so there would be one less obstacle to worry about. While each of the heroes goes on their own journey as I mentioned, Silver is the one who successfully puts a stop to the Doctor's plans and returns to the future knowing that heroes like Sonic and Shadow are present in this timeline to stop any future threats. And since we're here, we might as well quickly discuss the sequel to this game, obviously named Sonic Rivals 2. Another straightforward plot involving Eggman Nega once more, and an additional partner character for the previous entry's main 4 heroes. Tails for Sonic, Rouge for Knuckles, Metal Sonic who's being controlled by Eggman remotely, and SPO for Silver. Long story short though, Eggman Nega discovers the late Dr. Gerald Robotnik's journal that details his research on an extra-dimensional being named the Ifrit that has the ability to completely obliterate worlds. I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but Dr. Eggman Nega is clinically insane. Whereas Eggman wants to rule over all of humanity, Eggman Nega just straight up doesn't want there to be a humanity. Everyone bands together to put a stop to the threat however, but no Sonic thing this time around since you can't access any super forms in this game. And that pretty much sums up the Rivals games, but we've got one more stop before the gears get switched up. Sonic Rush got a sequel, and that's cool. More Blaze is always a good time in my opinion, and for this adventure, it's a reversal of how things were in the first game. Sonic and Tails get caught up in a thunderstorm and wash up on a beach with no idea where they are. Enter your friendly neighborhood Australian, Marine the Raccoon. Just a gal who wants to be the best sea captain around, but she has a lot of work to do and we'll just leave it at that. These 3 eventually run into Blaze, who's currently fighting some robot pirates that have a very familiar looking design to them, and that's when they discover where they are. Fast forward, lo and behold, the Eggers were behind it yet again. Part of me thinks that maybe these 2 were a last minute addition since they quite literally don't show up until all of the Chaos and Soul Emeralds are collected, but the final boss theme is nice and we get to learn more about Blaze's world. Also, Eggman Nega legit just has a button to blow up the world that he was genuinely about to press, had it not been for Marine's interference. It's not discussed here if at this point of the game, Eggman knows Nega is his descendant, as we learned in Sonic Rivals, but just take this guy's continuity with a grain of salt. So, how about some easier to digest stories before we depart from this station, huh? Sonic Riders and its direct sequel, Sonic Riders Zero Gravity, all have to do with new rivals for our Team Sonic cast of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. The Babylon Rogues are bird-like creatures that taunt professional skills with these hoverboards called Extreme Gear, and they're best known outside of that for being proficient thieves as well. Jet the Hawk, Wave the Swallow, and Storm the Albatross make up this team, and these two games go into their ancestry roots, unfolding a story that has to do with not letting the actions of those that came before you dictate how you navigate your life in the current day. To see each of the Babylon Rogues' rivalries with the corresponding members of Team Sonic play out is a nice breakaway from the seriousness that was often associated with the series at this time. And the gameplay of these two entries being extremely fun also helps with learning to care about these new characters as well. I highly recommend these to any fans of unique racing mechanics and those that are looking to challenge themselves. Rounding us out in this section is the Sonic Storybook Duology series that contains Sonic and the Secret Rings and Sonic and the Black Knight, a pair of titles that see the Blue Hedgehog being sucked into fictional stories to solve whatever the current issue is at hand, and the messages here are unironically deep, but not in a way that's so in your face. Secret Rings sees Sonic being transported to the Book of the Arabian Nights. The Genie of the Ring, Shara, calls forth the Hedgehog and requests assistance in restoring the different stories to their former glory after a genie gone rogue named Eraser Jin has carved them apart as he looks for the 7 world rings, MacGuffins akin to the Chaos Emeralds that have the power to release Eraser from his page-filled prison and into the real world. Cueing the adventure, Sonic gets shot with a death flame, only getting a certain amount of time to collect the world rings for Eraser, and this now became a race against the clock, involving 2 people that have unshakable wills. A couple of dinosaurs, steampunk golems, and pirate sieges later, Sonic and his new genie friend enclose upon the Jin's palace. As the final showdown arrives, it's implied that Shara and Eraser Jin are/were in a relationship together, one that, at least from how he acts, involved abuse on the villainous genie's end. At some point, he manipulated Shara into getting Sonic to their world so the Hedgehog could collect the rings, seemingly with the promise that if she did that, the two of them would finally be together freely. However, torn between the two though, Shara makes the ultimate sacrifice instead of Sonic, offering up her life for tricking someone that was never anything but kind to her. Eraser, taking the moment to gather his prize, collapses his world as we know it and is malformed into a hideous and incomplete creature. And Sonic, now filled with the emotions of rage, hatred, and sadness at the loss of his friend, begin the duel. The Sonic thing happens, but you see it's different this time because he's purple and has race stripes and is aptly named Dark-Spine Sonic. Pretty damn sick if you're asking me. Reverting the world back to what it was, bringing Shara back to life, and concluding the squabble with Eraser Jin by sealing him back into his lamp forevermore, Sonic reassures Shara that letting go is rarely the end of things for oneself. Life goes on and there's always something new just over the horizon waiting for you if you can find the courage to pursue it. You just have to take that first step. And so, he says his goodbyes and it's on to the next story. By all accounts, there's one game in particular that released between these two, but I decided to couple everything pre that entry and you'll understand why in a sec. Before that though, we have to quickly tackle Sonic and the Black Knight. This takes very similar approaches to its plot as Secret Rings, but instead of the Arabian Nights, Sonic sees himself summoned to the book of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table by the wizard Merlina. She summoned him here as a means of saving her world from the treacherous Black Knight. Basically, King Arthur, but corrupted and possessing the scabbard of Excalibur, the legendary sword, that makes him immortal. Making quick work of the King's army, Sonic is ready to get the request over with as quickly and as painfully as he arrived, but Merlina whisks him away before he can act. A wise move, considering that there were 3 armored figures off in the distance watching the whole thing. Before he can even think about taking on the Black Knight, Sonic must find the legendary sword Caliburn to use at his side, and so he does. Caliburn is sentient, however, and immediately hops to insulting the Hedgehog, but takes him under his wing to train him as a proper knight that will be able to face the tests that are sure to come. And from there, we have our story. Sonic learns what it takes to be a knight for the people, slay a dragon, and show mastery over chivalrous behavior before he can be a suitable opponent. Along the way, he defeats and takes the sacred weapons of those armored individuals we saw earlier, who happen to be not only the Knights of the Round Table, but also this world's equivalent of Shadow, Knuckles, and Blaze. Upon completing that task and the numerous others that Caliburn assigned him, he grants Sonic the title of Knight of the Wind. It's off to fight the Black Knight and obtain Excalibur's scabbard, which Sonic does so elegantly, but turns out that the hurdle he's been working towards toppling this entire time was just an illusion? You see, Merlina, who disappeared from the story shortly after Sonic and Caliburn met, tricked the Blue Blur into completing everything he did so that she could utilize the sacred weapons that the Knights of the Round Table had in order to create an everlasting world that would see its inhabitants never have to worry about sickness, famine, or perishing in any way. As a matter of fact, this plan was originally fostered by her grandfather of all people, the wizard Merlin, back when he was alive. Crazy really does run in the family, doesn't it? Sonic and the Knights of the Round Table develop a plan to seal the spread of malevolence spilling out from Merlina's position by using the sacred swords as a stopgap, subsequently sending in one lone soldier to finish the fight. The wizard proves to be too much for our hero Sonic though, shattering Caliburn in half, but with a smile on his face and his wits about him, Sonic the Hedgehog presses the attack. An act that awakens the true form of Caliburn, transforming him into the legendary sword Excalibur, that was previously hidden, hence why Merlina only had the scabbard. And say it with me, folks. He does the Sonic thing, but you see it's different because he has golden armor and a sword. Our boy wins the fight, and instead of taking out Merlina for good, he gives her a bit of a pep talk, stating that no one wants to live in a world that goes on forever, because that stops them from making the best of the time they have left. It's also pointed out in this scene that the sword Excalibur has the right to point out who the next king should be, and that just so happens to be the little blue hedgehog that we know all too well. With that, Sonic takes his leave, and as per usual, it's off to the next story. Hiya. So, that was a lot, right? Too many new characters, new concepts, new ideas in what felt like such a short amount of time. And because of that, I really do appreciate if you're still here. And to see just how many of you are still watching at this point, just put a little hashtag Jiggy was right down in the comments below for me. It's sure to get everyone confused, and I mean, it'll be our little secret. Just take my word on that. However, paradoxically, in those last two games, Secret Rings and Black Knight, the whole point was to let those characters in those stories know that it's okay to let go of things and that everything must end whether we like it or not. And that's okay. However, I don't think players themselves knew that those themes were supposed to apply to them as well, since for the next 14 years, the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise would go through some of the strangest, yet seldom beautiful changes ever. From 2008 all the way to 2022, Sonic the Hedgehog went through a cultural shift. If you thought everything I detailed previously was too much regarding converging and diverging storylines, then you're in luck today, as the series saw some serious drawbacks as to how many elements were involved. Total involved characters seeing a slash from the higher number of 12 down to as low as 4 in some cases, story tones being watered down, and attempts at delivering a streamlined package. 2008 would see the release of Sonic Unleashed, the first culprit in this new chapter of the Hedgehog's life. Throwing you right into the action, Sonic Unleashed flips the script on its head, with what could easily be the final battle taking place in the prologue of all places. Eggman is up to his schemes again, and Sonic is here to deliver a cease and desist. He even does the Sonic thing right away, but little does the furry speedster know that this was all part of the plan. Capturing his nemesis, Dr. Robotnik, yeah, you haven't heard that one in a while, have you? Drains the energy out of Super Sonic and uses it to power a giant laser that he then fires down at the Earth, shattering it into pieces and relinquishing a purple miasma from the core, which manifests itself into the caricature of something sinister. Getting a brand new look dubbed the Werehog, which is a direct result of this fiasco, Sonic is then ejected all the way from space down to the Earth below, landing right next to this fairy dog-like thing that appears to be suffering from amnesia. Possessing no idea about who they are or how they got here, Sonic, even given the circumstances he finds himself in, opts in to help the little guy regain his memory, somehow. even giving him the name Chip for the time being until he's able to remember what his original name was.
Want some chocolate?
Cue the pair digging around towns, running into Tails, who lets him know that there's a professor that may know a bit more about what's going on, rescuing said professor from Eggman because of course he kidnapped the one person who was all-knowing about the events as soon as they happened, and finally learning that they need to revitalize the Chaos Emeralds by placing them in altars located around the globe within designated temples. And now you have the plot of Sonic Unleashed. As the climax approaches, about 6 emeralds in to be exact, Chip's memory finally returns to him. Evidently, that entity that we saw burst forth from the Earth's crust earlier, and that's been spreading malice all across the world, is known as Dark Gaia, host of all that is negative within the world. The reason why the night is overrun with monstrous blobs of bleak aura, and the one responsible for Sonic's transformation into the Werehog. Conversely so, Chip is the other side of that coin. Light Gaia, being his actual name, is the direct competitor to Dark Gaia when tens of thousands of millennia have passed. Dark Gaia will break open the world apart, then Light Gaia will repair it. A cycle that has been happening on time since the dawn of it. Alas, Eggman expedited this process too early, leading to Chip's memory loss and Dark Gaia's incomplete form as seen in the beginning. Having all of the information previously unknown to them now at their disposal, the pairing head off for the last temple, which is located deep within the Doctor's theme park. Eggman Land? Holy shit, the guy actually did it after all these years. And it's beautiful. Difficult, but beautiful. It only took the complete destruction of a planet, but beggars can't be choosers. Thereafter, making their way to the temple found within Eggman Land, Sonic and Chip are met with Eggman's latest invention, and a fight ensues as all three are catapulted to the center of the Earth. Interrupting their fight, Dark Gaia finally arises, making short work of the same man who put this entire plan into motion as a means to control an entity further out of his league than he thought, and removing the energy that allowed Sonic to transform into the Werehog. With all of their options and Sonic, himself exhausted, Chip channels his inner Light Gaia energy, summoning all of the temples they've revitalized to his location and forming the Gaia Colossus. The smackdown ensues, and after gaining his footing back, Sonic's able to transform into a super form and commence the final assault against a now perfected Dark Gaia. Delivering a final and exhaustive blow, Sonic collapses but is sent back up to the surface by Chip before the crust of the Earth reforms itself, leaving the ancient entity in his darker half to return to the resting period, until the next cycle of destruction and rebirth calls them forth again. Waking and finding himself back at the point of origin for this adventure, Sonic picks up a memento left behind by his now dormant friend, faces the horizon, and before you have a second longer, speeds off into his next adventure. Sonic Colors is the true beginning to this series' penchant for having simpler stories. The context around it makes it obvious as to why this is the case, as this game was released exclusively on weaker Nintendo consoles, namely the Wii and DS. Astoundingly, there are 2 different stories for each medium this entry was released on, but they follow similar enough structure. For both versions, Dr. Eggman has created an interstellar amusement park under the guise of it being an apology for any and all past transgressions. Sonic and Tails sneak in an early trip to the park to see what's truly going on. In the DS version, a bunch more characters travel here, Amy, Cream, Omega, the Chaotix, etc., but they don't really have any story importance. Not soon after setting foot on the amusement park though, our main duo uncover that Eggman has enslaved several planets, is siphoning energy from these alien life forms that call themselves Wisp, and is turning those same aliens into a negative or animalistic version of themselves. Sonic and Tails befriend one of these aliens in particular, who introduces himself as Yacker and accompanies them throughout the rest of the game. As such, the rest of the journey is dedicated to freeing everything from under the Doctor's control. Once all the planets and Wisp are freed, it's time to call everything a job well done. But as luck would have it, some debris that Sonic kicked away earlier while trashing Eggman bots happened to strike the core of the amusement park, an act that began destabilizing the whole place. Before the heroes can make their break though, Eggman goes for a last-ditch effort by utilizing the Wisp energy he'd stored up as an ultimate power. Alas, the combined powers of Sonic and all the Wisp that came to his aid are too great for the Doctor, thus officially retiring him from this escapade. It's not quite over yet though. The core begins to swallow itself from the inside out using the energy it's taken in, creating a black hole in its wake. And with nothing else to do but to head back down, my goat Sonic the Hedgehog outruns a black hole for just under 30 seconds. Wisp, who are somehow immune to the vacuum of these space anomalies, just gently kinda help Sonic get back to the Earth's surface, where then Yacker, Sonic and Tails all say their final goodbyes, putting a cap on yet another adventure. Everyone likes a good anniversary, right? Sonic Generations has you covered in that regard, and although the gameplay more than makes up for it, the lack of an impactful story in an anniversary title is a bit disheartening. Such as it goes, there are now technically two Sonics. One from the past, meaning the games from the early days that we've already covered, and the other being the Sonic we've discussed for these past few entries. Just dub these guys as Classic Sonic and Modern Sonic. While running through Green Hill Zone one day and minding his business, Classic Sonic is then met with an unknown purple monster that presumably sweeps him up as the screen fades to white. All the way in the future though, Modern Sonic is currently celebrating his birthday with a surprise party put together by his friends, when that same monster stops by without an invitation and kidnaps legit everyone that's there, leaving this version of our hero to the same fade to white fate. Each Sonic then wakes up in a liminal area known as White Space, this vast yet strangely familiar canvas. After officially meeting their older and younger selves, both groups of Sonic and Tails come to the conclusion that they're traveling through time and space, with the speed of both Classic and Modern Sonic revitalizing the areas they're visiting and restoring them to the proper timeline, all the while saving their friends who are also caught in limbo. Fast forward to more friends freed, Chaos Emeralds obtained, and meeting all the appropriate conditions, the Sonics find themselves at the door of the monster that kickstarted this whole event. And if you guessed that Eggman was behind this plot, you'd be sorely mistaken, believe it or not, because it was actually two Eggmen, but not Nega. I don't know where he is, to be honest. It's Modern Eggman and Classic Eggman, or Dr. Robotnik if you're feeling fancy.
Nobody calls me that anymore.
Oh, damn. My bad. They've been piloting this entity known as the Time Eater like it's a mecha from Evangelion, that Modern Eggman found at the end of Sonic Colors. But with a name like that, you can pretty much imagine what this thing is and what it does. The goal was to have every previous loss that the Doctor incurred erased from all of existence, using this glorified rewind button as a means to correct past mistakes. Of course, the Sonics can't have that, so they do the you know what, but it's double now, and everyone knows that double the hedgehogs mean double the fun. Battles within space-time subside, and everyone's returned to the birthday party from the opening, while Modern Sonic sees his younger self off back to the past with a promise that the future would be a blast, bringing the story of Sonic Generations to a close. If you thought Sonic Colors and Sonic Generations had streamlined stories, then Sonic Lost World would like to have a word with you. Unfortunately, out of all the games in this section, Lost World is the most barren. A game that takes the idea of a video game mascot being a Saturday morning cartoon, amplifying it to a 10 and making it arguably the weakest narratively. There's still some fun to be had, but as far as the story, I'm truly going to keep this as simple as possible. Dr. Eggman is back to kidnapping using small animals to power his machines again, so that's a plus, but this time he's doing it on a small planetoid found within the sky named the Lost Hex. What is he doing here, you may be asking? Well, just building a machine that will siphon energy from the Earth to help power his operations. No biggie. Additionally, he has some of the inhabitants of this planetoid under his control as henchmen, some group of individuals that call themselves the Deadly Six, a pack of Zeddy that aren't too happy with the fact that they were enslaved by Eggman and have been quietly biding their time for the perfect opportunity to present itself. It does, when Sonic foolishly rids the Doctor of the only stopgap he had on hand to negate the Zeddy's innate ability to control machines, hence turning what is quite literally Eggman's whole shtick against him, including that aforementioned machine that drains Earth's energy. Lost World's lore has pretty much nothing else to do outside of that. Defeat the remaining members of the Deadly Six, Tails does get captured and turned into a robot, but that doesn't last long. Amy and Knuckles sorta just die, and oh yeah, they're here, but it's not important, because of the energy machine, and when it seems like everything is dandy, Eggman makes one more move and tries to use the stored energy as a weapon to destroy Sonic. Wait, what? Why does that sound familiar? But yeah, that is Lost World's complete story. An interesting premise with some decent moments here and there, but overall, a package that misses marks it had no reason missing. I wish I could say things were a little bit different for the next mainline games. 2017 rolls around and Sonic has two of these released for his 25th anniversary. Sonic Mania and Sonic Forces go hand in hand with their lore, and it centers around a mysterious gem called the Phantom Ruby, a rock that has the ability to warp reality for whoever the user designates, making the distinction between what's real and what's not a little bit blurry. Mania is the first game this shows up in, and here Dr. Eggman finds it on Angel Island with the help of his egg robos. But as soon as the gem is yoinked from the ground, it alters those same robots into their own individuals with distinct personalities. Tie this in, along with the fact that Sonic is transported to Green Hill Zone, and you have an expedition for the Blue Blur to take on. The plot of this game revolves with you trying to get the rock away from Eggman and his lackeys, resulting in a final battle where the head honcho of the Egg Robos, named Heavy King, follows the footsteps of the bots before him and turns on the Doctor. Caught in the middle between a creator and his creation, Sonic has to juggle both of these juggernauts, but in doing so, once the battle subsides, he's transported to somewhere through a portal. Wonder if it's a vacation. Fast tracking it to Sonic Forces, however, modern Eggman finds a version of the Phantom Ruby in his timeline as well, subsequently experimenting on and weaponizing it because, say it with me, of course he does. Possessing the same power as the one found in the past, this Eggman uses the Phantom Ruby to launch a full-scale invasion on an unsuspecting world, and he actually wins. He does so by creating copies of some of Sonic's greatest foes that he's faced to date: Metal Sonic, Chaos, Shadow, and the leader of the Deadly Six, Zavok. Those four, combined with the Doctor's newest lackey, Infinite, who presumably has complete control over the Phantom Ruby as well, are able to defeat, capture, and it's implied that they torture Sonic for 6 months, a possibility that completely breaks down Tails' mental as he goes AWOL. In the Hedgehog's absence, a resistance is formed though, but as time goes on, the tightrope the rest of our heroes are walking on becomes smaller and smaller, trying to keep that resistance together. That is, at least, until a new recruit joins the fray, which in this case is literally the player. Yeah, this game with the whole original character route, which some people hated, some loved, but I say whatever floats your boat, sail it. Discovering by some miracle that Sonic is alive, and finally having your help, the Resistance send you, the new recruit by the way, in to save the Hedgehog, and the two of you escape pretty damn easily, might I add. While all that is happening, Tails finds a broken down Omega and attempts to reboot him, but is interrupted by a copy of Chaos. Right before it can strike though, classic Sonic hops out of that portal from earlier that we talked about, saving the Fox and officially joining the fray. That's about everything even remotely interesting about what happens throughout this game. We don't find out anything more about the Phantom Ruby's origins, and the stakes that the game started with just kinda fizzle out within the first 15 minutes. Infinite, the new villain I was talking about, was shaping up to be a contender for best new Sonic enemy in a while, even almost dropping a whole sun on the Resistance, but the Avatar character pulls a Deus Ex Machina and destroys it. Then, to make matters worse, Infinite gets wiped out without a second thought shortly after that. At least Eggman puts up a good fight. He uses the stored up energy of the Phantom Ruby to craft a weapon capable of destroying Sonic, and hey, wait a minute. This is the third time you've gotten away with this, dog. Please get another trick. So the day is saved, classic Sonic kinda just fades into nothingness, JK, he goes back to his own timeline, and Sonic gives this weirdly meta speech about caring about and changing the world, but again, I digress. Sonic Forces left as soon as it came, and this would be the last mainline Sonic game for a while. 5 years, in fact. However, what we got after those 5 years would objectively be part of the largest shift in Sonic's history since he first exploded onto the scene back in 1991. We have finally reached the 2020s. Spoiler alert, but if there was any time for you to hop into the Sonic franchise, this is it. Speaking in real time, thus far in the series we've had 3 great movies that have all improved upon one another, a handful of fire games, and the general public has all eyes on Sonic's every move in a positive manner again. This is a game that revolutionized the monotony of gameplay or story beats that fans and critics alike just had to deal with for the better part of a decade. Yet it also kept certain sections familiar as to not completely alienate its fan base. Being the first of your kind is a daunting task, regardless of how proficient, or in some cases how inept, you used to be at other things. The Sonic game that chose to go out on one last limb and give it everything it could was Sonic Frontiers. There's some pretext we have to discuss before the main events take place though, specifically starting out with Eggman and Knuckles. Ever being the one to find ancient deities and world-ending energy sources, Dr. Eggman comes across the Starfall Islands in his research. It was said that a technologically advanced civilization once made their home in this collection of landmasses. However, the group suddenly disappeared with only the physical constructs left behind to record their ever being proof of quartering. Our good doctor, as the opportunist he is, travels to these islands in hopes of hijacking the ancient technology with his AI and using it to conquer the world. While he is indeed able to tap into the historical database of these constructs, his own artificial intelligence, dubbed Sage, detects dangerous anomalies within the code of the ancient tech, which spawns a multitude of figures behind the Doctor. This results in Sage activating a defensive protocol, absorbing the Doctor into the physical construct he was just standing in front of, but we'll get back to him later. Q and Knuckles, who as always, is just chilling on Angel Island and protecting the Master Emerald. A child brings him an item that isn't familiar to either one of them, and if you remember, Angel Island is a place that Knuckles knows like the back of his hand. So he follows the child to the spot where it picked up the strange circular object, and discovers a construct not too dissimilar to the one that we just saw Eggman come across on the Starfall Islands. Holding up the gear to the construct, Knuckles is hit with the same sort of trick that Eggman was, but we see an exit point this time around. Wary of his new surroundings, as any good warrior would be, the Echidna quickly finds himself encircled within a ring of enemies. However, he's not the one trapped in here with them. It's quite the opposite, really. Showing why he's rougher than the rest of them and making quick work of the unknown assailants, Knuckles is then met with an ominous-looking figure floating high up in the sky. With it, a foe too massive and unsuspecting for the Echidna to dispatch on his own. Waking up later, the Guardian finds himself in a situation all too familiar, yet distinctly horrifying. Alone, but this time in an unknown land and imprisoned, where he will stay for the time being. Taking a leap to the present day, we catch up with Sonic, Tails, and Amy, who are heading to the Starfall Islands themselves due to Tails researching that all the Chaos Emeralds have migrated over to the landmasses for some mysterious reason. This being a big deal since usually, the gems are scattered all across the place and rarely all in one location. Before our trio can reach the islands though, each and every one of them are sucked into a wormhole that spreads open and swallows the heroes, notably sharing the same colorway that was present when Eggman and Knuckles got wrapped up in whatever mess this is as well. Using his speed presumably, Sonic is able to escape from something called cyberspace. We know this because a disembodied voice tells him so, but along with that, gives the Hedgehog a directive to follow. With limited information on where he is exactly and where his friends are, Sonic does what he does best and moves forward. Eventually running into a trapped Amy and subsequently freeing her, they find that she is stuck in a strange cyber limbo, as we'll call it. Amy deduces that whatever Sonic's been doing regarding fighting the enemies on this island and traveling to and from cyberspace is making her problem better bit by bit. But conversely, it's transferring the energy from her into the blue blur. So surely that won't become a problem later on, right? Going throughout this first island, Sonic comes across that same figure that Knuckles ran into when he was first transported, but she's far from friendly. This is Sage, Eggman's AI, that he used to tap into the ancient technology.
Unwelcome pests like you will be swiftly eliminated.
She was somehow given a pseudo-corporeal form and harasses Sonic with threats that he needs to leave the Starfall Islands immediately, even going as far as to summon a titanic being to try and get the job done. Not letting his spirits be deterred though, it's clear that Sonic is going to need a bit of help in taking down whatever that was with the Chaos Emeralds. And so, everyone, we have our plot device to move us forward. After completing all the tasks associated with the first island he found himself on, which includes taking down that Titan Sage summoned earlier, Sonic unfortunately has not freed Amy of this cyber limbo he found her in, and takes direction from the disembodied voice to continue taking on the other islands as Titans. With that, he storms off to the next destination. There are several conversations that can be had with the supporting cast, both Sonic's friends and Sage, but it all centers around the history of the islands or how the characters are feeling about the situation at hand. It's a nice foundation that addresses a lot of past adventures this specific group has gone on, the things they've experienced, how it's changed them, and where they want to go from here. Amy wants to spread love back into a world that may have forgot how to. Knuckles reflects on if he's had the chance to live a fulfilling life and the fact that he truly is the last of his kind. And Tails comes to terms with the hard truth that he's still a kid and has much to learn, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Through conversations with Sage, optional or not, you learn more about who she is in relation to Eggman and what the MO of them coming to the Starfall Islands was. These two have formed a bond akin to that of father and daughter, something that the Doctor notes down in these collectible voice memos he's been recording since his time present in cyberspace. Sage cares deeply for her father figure, and seeing that she is, as of this date, his most sophisticated and intelligent AI, her autonomy, ability to reason, and make sound judgments is one that both scares and impresses Eggman. As a byproduct of conversing with the homies and Sage, Sonic is able to learn that the entities who station themselves on the Starfall Islands are simply known as the Ancients. We proceed to learn more about them as Sonic is about to complete his final task. They were a race of people who used the Chaos Emeralds as an energy source, and made great strides in all manners of science. But when an all-powerful entity threatened their existence, the civilization was forced to flee from their homeworld. Yet, while in the midst of traversing the vastness of space and looking for a safe haven, the energy cores of their ships, aka the Chaos Emeralds, were drawn to Earth by at the time an unknown force. In that same breath, the scene pans down to reveal that the Master Emerald was the source that was calling out to the gems, forcing the Ancients to make the Starfall Islands their new base of operations. But you can't run from your problems forever. The entity that posed a threat has found its prey once more, and as a last line of defense, lo and behold, it's the Titan units that Sonic has been destroying since he stepped foot on the shores of the landmasses. Whatever this thing is, it makes every last one of the Titans appear as cannon fodder in its wake, forcing the remaining Ancients back on Earth to split themselves up between two different locations, one half staying behind on the Starfall Islands, and the others making their way to what would soon become known as Angel Island. Upon shutting down the last tower, which is a defense mechanism, the energy Sonic's been absorbing from freeing his friends has finally reached its breaking point, ultimately incapacitating the Hedgehog at the cost of everyone else being free. With the active threat now free of restraint and still looming over their head, Amy, Knuckles, and Tails all decide to once again enter their cyber limbo states to free Sonic from his so that he can finish the job. Having a renewed sense of duty, Sonic teams up with Eggman and Sage for the final showdown, which hits its climax when the last Titan appears as a stopgap. With this last obstacle out of the way, the entity known as the End, whose disembodied voice Sonic has been hearing throughout the adventure, shows itself. It appears to everyone as something different, the commonality of it being that it symbolizes death. For us and assumingly Sonic's gang, it appears as a moon, one that plans to escape from the Starfall Islands and spread its corruption to the entirety of Earth. But Supersonic and a Sage-controlled Titan have something to say about that. A well-fought battle, honestly. Sonic even manages to shoot himself right through the core of the enemy, but noticing the threat of an imminent self-destruct sequence from their enemy, Sage, with her quick thinking and Dr. Strange's ability to see millions of outcomes, comes to the conclusion that her sacrifice will be the last saving grace, lest everything they fought to achieve will be in vain. She rams into the planetoid containing the explosion and making one last request, for Sonic to look after her dear father. Our heroes celebrate the victory, but a distraught Eggman gazes past the horizon, lamenting on the daughter that left him behind so that he could have a chance to be happy and live. As they prepare for takeoff, Tails, Amy, and Knuckles are ready to embark on the promises they made to themselves as well as to Sonic, and with the utmost confidence in those whom he calls his friends, they all set off to whatever's in store. There's one last title that we could cover in depth, but it serves as a course correct or streamlining of Shadow the Hedgehog's story. It is the most recent title release, dropping in October of last year, and acts as a very well put together package of everything that you could want to know about the Dark Hero and his relationship to everyone he holds dear. From a detailed characterization of Maria and Gerald, to his feelings about his other Team Dark members and vice versa, and even covering the dynamic he shares with Sonic post Sonic Adventure 2. I won't cover the story here since it is so new, but I implore everyone to experience Shadow Generations, even if it's just watching the cutscenes and dialogue. Of course, support the development team, but if you like anything I've said about Shadow in this video, experience this game. So, that is the entire key mainline history of the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, but I haven't been entirely truthful, however. Apologies if when we got to about the Sonic Lost World 2 Forces side of the history, things became a bit monotonous, as that's where I personally dropped the series for a number of years back in 2013. There was so much going on within this franchise at the time that it made the idea of being a fan difficult. Too many instances of misdirection with the gameplay, characterizations, the whole nine. It's a whole discussion we could go into, but I've already kept you captive for however long this video will be at 16,000 words. I will say that in the time of my absence from the official franchise though, fan games are what kept me going and are still part of the reason why I'm a fan of this guy to this day. If it's not the many 2D sprite art games, then it's the Sonic Riders mods, or any number of original creations that dedicated creators have put together because they also love Sonic. Getting a bit sentimental here, I was introduced to the Sonic series by my older brother, who unfortunately passed away last year, and my whole journey on YouTube was in part inspired by his passing, since he always felt that I was good at creating stuff like this. Whenever we'd play Smash Bros and I picked Sonic, my brother would always say that he was my best character, even though I typically made Marth, but that's a whole other thing. I'd often force him as a kid to play Sonic Adventure 2 or Secret Rings' multiplayer mode with me, and luckily he would often oblige. But I say all this to say, without going any deeper, Sonic the Hedgehog is a series that brings people together, inspires them to create, and reassures them that it's okay to stand up for and be themselves. Without this little blue hedgehog that's become my comfort character, even at the ripe age of 26 years old, I don't know where I'd be today, and that's not just me being hyperbolic. So, while to some, Sonic may be this rebellious mascot that refuses to disappear like the rest, he's a legend in the eyes of so many more that can't wait to see him win.